The video that you're supposed to be watching right now is me taking on a half marathon race and trying to break 75 minutes or get as close as I can. But a week out from the race, I was doing a training run and unfortunately I tore a muscle in my calf.
This is often the reality, though, for a lot of runners. You train really hard for something, but injury strikes and you have to completely rethink the plan.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're not shying away from injury. We want to find out how Andy's feeling, what the new plan is, how do we deal with injuries when they happen, and how do you overcome those feelings? So let's get into it.
Andy, so take us back to the beginning. What was the challenge? What were you aiming for here?
So all of my personal bests over the shorter distances are from my life as a professional athlete. So that's up to 10,000 meters. And I think those are out of reach now forever.
Maybe.
Too old.
Hey,
and
believe
too
in
slow.
yourself.
Yeah. But the marathon I took on for the first time last year in 2023, and I'm doing it again this year. And then as part of that build-up, I wanted to see if I could run as fast a half marathon as possible, because that's a distance in the middle, and it's a distance I don't really have an official PB for. I've only run one.
I see.
And it's on trail. So this was an opportunity to set a personal best.
Yeah.
So I was getting stuck into the training, and that's where the challenge came from. See how fast I can go over half marathon.
And did you still find, I know you love the shorter distances, but is that kind of not having a number in your head from before, did that motivate you?
Yeah, because I mean, there's two sides to it. Rick always jokes about, like, in the pole vault, when you set the world record, you only do it by a kiss a PB. So only just do it
Kiss
by,
it.
just do it
Don't
by
high jump the pole vault.
Yeah, do it by a few seconds or a few centimeters.
Yeah.
And there's, very regularly throughout my career, and then even in recent years, I can comfortably run a half marathon in around 90 minutes on a Sunday as part of a normal training run. So then,
That is disgustingly
Yeah,
quick,
that
isn't it?
Isn't it? I mean, I was thinking these numbers he's doing, Sarah, here. What, going for 75 minutes? That's 50 minutes quicker than what I could potentially do a half in. The things you can do in 50 minutes. I mean, literally.
He would have got home, taken his shoes off, put the kettle on, and could be sat drinking a cup of tea, and you're still running.
I could have had a whole day at work.
That's all you do. So that's the motivation, and I didn't want to set a goal that I knew that I could do. I guess that's one of the things we talk about on the running channel is you want to push yourself out of your comfort zone, but not so far it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
And in speaking to Andy Hobdell, who's coached me throughout my career, he was very ambitious and thought, 75 minutes is doable. When you do the maths, it's really scary. It's like 3:33 or 3:34 per kilometre for 21k.
That's not even running.
Sprinting. So that is, throughout this half marathon process, I've actually come at it from two different ways. One of me has been quite blasé about it, where I'm like, well, I did a marathon last year. Half marathon's much less. I can knock this out. We've been joking in the office about whether I even needed to fuel for it. Turns out on a recent training run, I found out that yes, I will need to fuel for it.
Yeah, don't worry, we all make mistakes as well.
As
much
make
as we...
mistakes in training.
Yeah, do as we say, not as we do.
Did you think you had that? Did you think you had that 75 minutes?
Well, I'm going to go give it a go, and then I guess we're going to talk about resetting my goals and what I think is realistic. But how I ended up at 75 minutes is because we're lunatics in running, and we seem to only really work in 5-minute chunks.
Oh no, it is weird.
That's so true.
So I thought about 80 minutes and sub 80 minutes, and then when I spoke to Andy, he was like, "Well, I think you could do that now." So. What do you want to do?
He believes in you,
I know,
doesn't
he does believe in me too much.
You didn't go, right, 79, maybe it's 78.
No, we'll do 5, we'll drop it.
Yeah, 75.
So
do you know, I was in bed a couple of Sundays ago, and it was about...
of course you were. Not midday?
Just getting up for work.
It was just getting light. It was just getting light. It was 4 a.m, and all of a sudden, I just heard this pop, and the bed just shakes against the wall, and I'm just like, what is going on? The bed is shaking against the wall. A training exercise from an RAF jet had flown over our house and just gone past the speed of sound. A sonic boom over the top of our part of North London.
Wow.
And then Chantal woke up and we were like, what on earth? Has Andy just run past us in his training session?
That's how I imagine that I run past people and the impact that I have.
But how do you break down from going, like 75 minutes is kind of such like a hard, tangible number to actually think about. When you then break it down and you go, oh, actually, that is quite quick. Yeah. How do you tackle that in training?
Well, I tackle it in training by doing either side of race pace. And funnily enough, that I picked up the injury actually doing race pace stuff, which is around 3:30 per kilometre, which should be comfortable, and it really didn't feel comfortable. And I actually think that the lesson I've learned from this is that and I knew it already, but you sort of need it reinforcing. I'm more susceptible to illness, injury, all of that stuff when life is stressful. And I'm tired and I haven't recovered properly, and just feeling I felt like a bit of a mess in that session generally. So I was running race pace and thinking, I can barely do this for a K. How am I going to do this for 21K?
I think that's very relatable. I often feel like a mess in my training sessions. But then talk us through that moment, but also the lead up to it, because compared to your marathon training block where, you know, there was stuff going on, but I think your life was pretty boring from September to December last year. Compare that to what's happened during your half marathon training block.
Oh my goodness. Too much stuff. And in hindsight, it was just the goal felt just out of reach, but doable with the kind of training I had for my marathon, which was diligently knocking out every single run, not doing anything special, but just doing what I was told every week. Just
that
showing
consistency.
Up. Yeah, exactly. Whereas I started really well. Then it obviously gets really hot in July, which makes things difficult, especially those long runs. Then straight into a 2-week family holiday, which was lovely. But I was getting up way earlier than I normally would to fit it in so that I don't feel like I'm impacting on my time with the family.
Yeah.
Then we went straight from my holiday to this amazing experience with you both at the Olympics, where we were talking about the action out there every day. But then it was 30 degrees in Paris and we were working these 14-hour days. Then I was trying to fit in runs. And out there, I had a little niggle, not quite as serious as this one. But by the time I came back, I then don't think I realised how much I needed to recover. And I just didn't listen to my body properly. So
you burnt yourself out, didn't you?
I did. I really think I did, yeah.
So then going into the session where you kind of picked up this injury, did you feel like you were better and you were kind of head down, getting close to race day? Or do you think it had just all slowly crept up on you?
I think in hindsight, what I was trying to do is I'd had come back from another trip away camping. Again, not ideal in terms of like sleep and recovery.
I wonder why you bother paying the mortgage.
I know we're always in a tent.
You need to make these family holidays more running friendly.
Yeah, I should think about that. Although for such a long period of my life, everything revolved around running.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not sure I can inflict that on my lovely wife
imagine
anymore.
being a kid and being like, right, summer holiday, this is what your plan is for today. You're going to stand here holding a water bottle.
Yeah.
Dad's going to run past you and you just need to hold it out and then stay there for the next hour.
I was like, come on guys, it's training camp.
Click on the stopwatch, lap him.
Training camp, not holiday camp. Let's go. So I'd got to this point where I was actually really worried. Probably this is approaching 2 weeks to go till race day. You start to have that in the marathon. It's paranoia. But I just felt absolutely battered, and I was worried that I couldn't do it. And so I'd had a few easy days to try to get that kind of mojo back. And then the idea of this workout was it wasn't particularly challenging, but it was either side of race pace, and it was to give me that confidence to just be like, oh, actually, that's okay.
Yeah, I think we talked about it on the podcast. Like you needed that. Everyone deals with like fear or that kind of like anxiety around performance in a different way. And I feel like yours is when you're doing it and it's going really well, you like want to talk about it and you're feeling happy about it and everything's going well. And then you don't like talk about it if it's not going well. It's like
shut it down. I'm like, let's not talk
and
about
it literally goes from like, oh yeah, Andy's training for a half marathon. And then I feel like it got a bit like, is Andy training for a half marathon? And you were still running, but it's that kind of like going in on yourself a little bit because you've got that doubt.
Yeah, I'm a running ball when things are going well. I'm like, oh, I just did this session. It was so good. And then if you don't hear anything from me, it's probably not going that well.
Yeah.
So I needed that confidence. And I'm a runner who needs confidence. So we talk about different runs having a purpose. The purpose of that run for me was to give me the confidence that pace was okay. And I'll say that after the first. So I was alternating 1K reps basically. And after the first 2 of them, I was like, oh, I feel better than I felt last week. I don't feel like I can sustain this for 21K though.
Yeah.
And then I just started to get this little bit of tightness in my calf. And then I was running along at what actually felt like a pretty comfortable pace by this point. I had eased into it a little bit. And then the shooting pain just shot down my calf. And then your momentum carries you for an extra few steps, but you know when you just can't really put weight on it and you sort of jump up in the air a little bit. But then that like immediately, and then over the next few days, you do go through those like stages of grief. but for injury.
Yeah.
I can't remember the order in which they come, but initially on that run, I was still in denial. Like, I've done this before. I know what a muscle tear feels like. And that was definitely it. But I was still like, oh, you know what? Walking now feels all right. And so I'd walk another 100 meters.
Maybe I could jog a bit.
Yeah. And then I started jogging. I was like, oh no, it's a bit sore.
You-
And then you get back to the car and I think, am I going to train? Like, am I done now? Can I do a warm down, cool down, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
And then I was just like, no, that's stupid. So I did completely bin it. But there was still those thoughts that I could get back out and do it.
Do you think you did that because you were worn out, because you were run down, because you hadn't looked after your body properly in the last 2 months?
Yeah. It's a simple answer. I think yes. I think I was susceptible to it because of all of I'd had a little illness as well after Paris, where my body just was saying, I can't do this anymore. I think my different areas were getting tight in ways that they hadn't even during my marathon training. And I think it was just because I wasn't recovering properly. And I wasn't listening to my body, and I wasn't doing the maintenance that Rick and I talk about a lot in the gym. And so I'd skip that for almost 3 or 4 weeks. That's the hardest thing about being on holiday or being away. You can't go to the gym really. So I should have been supplementing that with body weight stuff to just keep that conditioning in the various muscle tissues. Because as I get older, I do need to look after myself a bit better and take care when I get those niggles.
It's interesting though. I think for a lot of people, they would go, you're an Olympian. You've done this for 10, 20 years now.
Yeah.
Surely you'd be the best person to know when to stop or like when to look after yourself. But do you think, because you love it so much, do you think you can ever get to that stage where when something bad happens, you're super diligent about it?
I've always been incredibly diligent. I prided myself in my career, but at the same time, you're always trying to walk the line of if I'm not pushing that limit when I was trying to be at the Olympics and be the best in the world, then I'll never get to be the best in the world. Like if I play it safe all of the time, then I'll be okay, and I might get there healthy. Which in hindsight, I probably should have done a bit more. But then at the same time, if you're not right on that limit, most of the time, I felt that was my way to be. Because I felt that at that point I was competing, there was, I think, a fair amount of doping prevalent, for example. And then you're thinking, well, I'm not going to cheat. So I need to train harder than those guys. And then now the difference in mindset is we're filming a video, or I'm under pressure because we're talking about it on the podcast, and there's thousands of people watching and listening to this who take stock or are interested in my journey, which is incredibly, it's an egotistical way to think about it. I don't think anyone really cares, but I love the messages of support that I get, and they're what gets me out of bed now to go training and to see what I can do to hopefully, if I can inspire one person that wants to go out of their comfort zone and try something new. It doesn't have to be time based. It might be that they run their first 5K in 5 years because they've seen a video. That's the stuff I love. And then I feel a different kind of pressure now because I don't want to let people watching down.
You described that pain of the shot, the rod going up your calf.
Yeah.
And you knew it was instant within, I think you said 3 to 4 steps afterwards. How is that different, the rod of pain shooting up the calf, to a niggle where you think, I might be able to run this off?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think none of us are medical professionals, but I've had my own experience with medical professionals and the advice I've received. And I think that the distinction is, there is a couple of different things. One is if you've got a small niggle, low level niggle, you start running and it's 3 or 4 out of 10 in terms of your level of pain. But as you start running, then that eases off. Then generally speaking, not all of the time, but generally speaking, that's a good sign. And that's probably okay. And that's like more likely to be a dull pain or a tightness than it is to be a kind of like a real sharp searing pain. And I think if you had a sharp searing pain that's a real pinpoint, that's likely to be more than 4 out of 10 anyway. So then that's sensible to get that checked out. If you got something that goes the other way, so it starts low level, just like a grumble that you couldn't really put your finger on, and then you start running and it gets worse and worse, then I think that's when you need to reassess. And then what I experienced is that almost out of nowhere, that's not quite true. On one of the reps, I felt like my calf was just a bit tight, like where you want to stretch something, that kind of feeling, which I tried to do. And then when I started and picked up the pace, that's when I got that pain. And because it was instant and like a shooting pain, and then it went from being fairly a tightness that moved around a bit to being in one very specific point. I think those are all indicators. So like stop, reassess, go back and recover as quickly as you can, and don't do anything silly. Like I was even considering doing, like testing it out, because that would have made it worse, I think.
And then what do you do? So you're in the session, that's happened.
Yeah.
You don't know quite what you've done. What were the next steps in order to working out when you could run again?
Well, my next step was to be so upset, and so cross that I went home and I did all the right things in terms of trying to kind of stay warm, not like standing around in my running kit because I was a bit sweaty and things like that. Like trying to just get clothing back on. I've no idea whether it will have actually made any difference, but I did put like some compression socks on.
Interesting.
To kind of like just protect that area for the rest of the day, because it started to get sore quite quickly.
Should you ice it?
Well, I don't know the latest advice on this, because this does change all of the time. Because the traditional 20 years ago, it would have been RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation. I'm not 100% sure. One thing I do know is that inflammation comes with the pain of injury. And so the temptation can be to take a painkiller like ibuprofen, because ibuprofen is also an anti-inflammatory, so it reduces inflammation. But my understanding of the latest science there is don't do that, because certainly not in the first 48, 72 hours. I don't know the exact numbers, because you need that. Your body needs to create that inflammation to protect the area and to start the healing process.
This is pretty well proven now, this bit.
Yeah, so so I definitely didn't do any of that. And then what I did was went into complete like take my mind off it thing, and I think I literally must have spent 10 hours building flat pack IKEA.
But paracetamol's all right though, isn't it? It's just not ibuprofen.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but
paracetamol's just a painkiller.
Yeah, it is. It has other effects as well, and you've got aspirin and things like that as well that people might take to thin their blood depending on their health conditions and so on. So you've got to be quite careful. So I'd say the main thing for me was to protect the area. And so that was by wearing a compression sock, and then obviously not like spending all day going out for walks and I think my experience, every athlete or runner wants to, if they have an injury, it doesn't matter how recently that it's occurred, they want to test it. So
100%.
So even like you're going to bed that night, and I had to resist the urge to like stretch it to see. So I was like, no, like
quick
I know
calf raise is all right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've seen people that I knew have had a diagnosed stress fracture recently. And like they feel fine walking around potentially, because that's a real like high impact injury or repetitive load injury.
Yeah.
And then I've seen them like when they don't think anyone's looking, like barefoot, like hopping to see if it.
Oh yeah, it's a bit like
you've got a bone injury. Stop it.
Oh yeah, it's a bit like when you break your neck on a snooker table in a Greek island.
At a wedding.
At a wedding.
Yeah. I was there for that, mate. I think it's
who
not
would
your
have done
smartest
that?
move.
Don't test it.
Well, I think the key thing is that if you do have anything that's like stopped you mid-run, it's going and seeking professional medical advice. So that's what you did. Yeah. Interestingly, so that happened on a weekend, and then you came in on the Monday and told us, and I was like, when are you seeing the physio?
Yeah.
And you were like, well, from previous injuries, you were like, actually today might not be the best day. So I think you waited till either the Tuesday or the Wednesday.
I went on the Wednesday, yeah. So I've had a lot of injuries.
Comes with being a professional athlete.
And there's two different kinds of physio treatment. There's a diagnostic kind of approach where you kind of want to find out the problem. Yeah. And then they might identify some weaknesses and give you the exercises to go and deal with those weaknesses for a long-term solution. And then there's the immediate kind of acute management of an injury. And I have had a lot of very hands-on physio. So people getting their kind of thumbs, elbows, whatever they can, pretty hard into an area of an injury or around it, or to loosen off tissue that's tightened up, or to kind of try and free off scar tissue where things might not be sliding as well as they might. And previously they've said to me, like, you've just had this injury. I need to let this it's same argument as the ibuprofen in a way. Like, you've got to let the inflammation. Swell. Yes, exactly. You've got to let things happen, and then once you get past a certain critical point, then you can start to get in there. That's what we did. The physio identified like that the niggle that I'd had in Paris. I think I'd had a slight, very, very minor tear or strain there that had developed some scar tissue, and that just I hadn't ever rehabbed it. So I hadn't either had treatment to kind of smooth out my muscle tissue or fascia or whatever might be giving me issues and tightness. But I also hadn't done the loading, because most injuries need, once you get past the point of like letting the body do its repair, you need to load that. So whether it's Achilles, calf, whatever it is, you need to build back up.
It's like a baby learning to walk.
I felt like that. And you do, and I went, this week I've built up really gradually with isometric calf holds, which is where you I'd go up on 2 feet, then take my weight on one leg, and then just hold that position. And you can see and feel the calf working really hard. And on the first few days, it's like, bear in mind that I would have taken thousands of steps to run a half marathon, where multiple times your body weight goes through your calf.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to try and stand on one tiptoe for like 10 seconds, and that's pretty hard.
Yeah, this is why
it's amazing how your body kind of.
This is why what's the isometric bit stand for?
That's isometric is where you're neither lengthening or shortening the muscle. You're just holding it.
You're just
stationary.
holding it. Yeah. This is why the single leg presses are so good for runners, because you're putting all the weight through one leg, whereas most people go into the gym, they do double leg presses.
Yeah.
Whereas for runners, we put so much weight, power, strength through one leg on every single stride.
Yeah, and that's the advantage of having expert advice, which I got.
Yeah.
To start with, it was sort of a little bit of pain still to go up on one foot, so to do an actual calf raise. So that's hence like using 2 feet to get up, because you're using your good leg to help you get there. And then I was pain free to hold that contraction at the top. So yeah, you're using, but that's the important thing during rehab is, one, do things once you're pain free on the individual legs. And two, do both legs. Don't just rehab the kind of the legs.
Otherwise, you're going to have a super leg and a leg which
I was
needs
going to
to
say you end up
catch
running
up.
around in circles then, but that's literally what I did for a living. so maybe that's what would have happened. The thing is, just for me, it's so frustrating for me. I wanted to be out there racing. We're actually sat here in the studio. I was really excited to be wearing these shoes. Kipwin have been supporting this whole challenge, and I'm incredibly grateful to them because they've taken such an amazing attitude to it. They're like, no, everything you're doing is way more important than like talking about us.
Yeah.
So a very quick shout out to say thank you. But I tested these shoes out in France, which is why I'm annoyed that I haven't been out there doing the race in them to see how fast I can get.
These are the Sonic Boom shoes.
The Sonic Boom shoes, yeah, the KD 900X LD, which is a bit of a mouthful, but they are great.
But the exciting thing is that it's not over. This is just a brief pause before the challenge restarts again.
Yes.
So one, how are you feeling now? And two, what's next in this challenge?
So the way my mind works and the way I've been able to be successful as an athlete is to like, you've got to accept those periods where you feel a bit sorry for yourself and sort of almost allow yourself to be a bit pathetic for a few days, which is how I felt. Probably how I've been at the office as well.
Yeah, we've allowed that too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been enablers.
Facilitated your
It's almost that time in your life where you
patheticness.
need to start drinking tea or coffee.
Yeah, no, I don't. It's
No?
never reached that point, right?
Warm cup of tea and a biscuit sorts everything out.
Yeah.
But for me, it's having a plan. So that in between period where it's gone from I'm injured now, I can't do this race, I have to make that decision, but I haven't seen the physio yet, so I don't know how bad it is, and I don't know what my plan is. That my attitude changes overnight when I see an expert and they say, "This is the problem. This is your approach every day now for the next 3 or 4 days. Check in with me, send me a message. How's it going?" And then we'll evolve that plan each day. And so that I've been through 2 or 3 stages of that with the physio where I've said, I can do this now. It doesn't hurt doing this. What's next? And they go, okay, do this next. And I find that incredibly satisfying. A bit like going into the gym and putting the weights up gradually every week, or building your running back where you add 10%, whatever that might be. That's my motivation. And so my plan is to just get as strong as I possibly can, and to use this time as well to be in the gym a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then to build back into running steadily. And then I am running a marathon at the end of December. So half marathon fits perfectly about halfway through that cycle. So I'll be racing another half marathon again, provided I can keep myself in one piece. And then I've come through the hard bit. The one thing I wanted to say to people is, even if it's only for a few days, so many of us feel like I'm a runner, but I'm not running. So you just have that immediate sense of like loss of identity. And that's the scary bit. So if you're feeling like that, send us a message at the running channel, because we will support you through it. Because that's a sort of horrible place to be in, but it doesn't last forever. So
No.
you need a plan.
Doesn't
and then
last forever.
You can push through it.
Absolutely. And we are so excited to see you take on this challenge in your Kit Run shoes, toeing the line, hopefully running 75 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be more realistic about what the exact goal ends up being based on how quickly I can get back to running. But I still have that at the back of my mind. And if I don't do it this time, then I'll do it next time.
Well, watch this space.
Or do it with me. I'll do it in 7.5 hours.
That would be a very different endurance challenge.
Yeah.
But watch this space. Make sure you're subscribed to the running channel so you don't miss Andy's comeback. And if you are injured, sending you lots of love, flood the comments, and let's support each other. And we'll see you soon.